Welcome back to Messages. On November 7th, the citizens of Lakeville will elect a new mayor and city council members. We thought this was an opportune time to interview in depth the Mayor Duane Zaun and Councilmember Betty Sint. Let's begin with our long-term mayor, Duane Zaun. Mayor, let's begin with a look back in your history as both from your family perspective, your parents and grandparents. Tell us a little bit about your heritage.
Well, both sets of my grandparents lived in Scott County, and of course my parents were born in Scott County. They married and bought a farm in Scott County, and I was born in Scott County. The farm in Scott County that my parents had was 120 acres, and I still own part of that. I went to school in a little town of Lydia in Scott County for my elementary years, and then went to Jordan High School, and I graduated from Jordan. So I haven't really ventured too far from where I was born and raised.
Let's move ahead to your courtship years with Mary and any significant other items that you would like to share of that period of time in your life.
Well, after I graduated from high school, I went in the service with a lot of my buddies, and of course there's a lot of writing back and forth with letters with different girls. Actually, when I got out of service, and I was in for 6 months active duty, and then the rest of the time was in reserves, I met Mary. She's from Montgomery because, you know, the guys would go down to different towns, New Prague, Jordan, Montgomery, and I met Mary, and we both were in college. We both decided to go to college, to Mankato State, and that's when we began to see each other quite regularly. I continued to work on a degree at the University of, well, now it's Minnesota, Mankato, and then I transferred to the University of Minnesota. During those years, then we became married and then started to raise a family. So it was a time when my wife was working to pay my way through college and at the same time raising children. Then and after I graduated from the University of Minnesota, where I transferred with, I finished a degree in Bachelor of Agricultural Business Administration. Only one of 6 that year to have that particular type degree. And I did work for Wilson and Company out of Albert Lee for a while, but everybody I called on to sell meat products said, hey, the best profession is teaching. And so at that time, there was a great need for math teachers, math and science teachers, and so I went back to the University of Minnesota, Mankato, and then got a teaching degree. And from there, my first job was here in Lakeville. I moved here in you don't believe this, 1963. Got my first job and have been living in Lakeville ever since. As a matter of fact, in the same house for 36 years. So again, I didn't venture very far from where I landed.
Tell us about your family, Mayor.
My oldest is a daughter, Lori. She currently resides in Clinton, Iowa, with husband Steve and 2 daughters. My second oldest is James. He lives in Manhattan Beach, California, with his wife Lainey and 2 boys. Third in line is John. John lives right here in Lakeville, not too far from where I live, as a matter of fact. John and his wife Corey and 3 children. And my youngest is my son Jeff, and his wife live on my farm. Actually, they bought 10 acres of the farm in Scott County, and they have 1 boy, is just a little over a year old, Jared. So 4 children, 2 close to me in Lakeville, and 2 that are out state.
What are your fondest memories of your childhood on the farm?
Well, I think basically, I remember one story. You know, I was the only boy on the farm. I had one sister, Pat. Being the only boy on the farm, my mother always said, particularly for the evening chores, it was a dairy farm, and my mother would say, I want you to go out now and help your dad in the barn with the chores. And I would go out there and ask my dad, you know, what can I do to help? And he says, I want you back in the house doing your, what he said, doing your studies. That meant, you know, hit the books. And so I'd walk back to the house, and my mother would say to me, what are you doing back here? I told you to go out and help your dad in the barn. I said to her, well, he said he didn't need any help. He wanted me back here doing my studies. And she says, well, he needs help. He can't do all that by himself. Go back out to the barn and help him. So I spent the whole evening walking back and forth from the house to the barn. So, but my dad was one who insisted on good education because he did not, you know, have that. My mother the same way. So I spent a lot of time studying and helping my dad.
Are there any traits that you gained from your experience on the farm that formed your foundation for leadership?
Well, I think one of the things is that I've learned is that you must continually learn and continually strive to improve. It was long term. Stick-to-itiveness is one thing that I think I learned. I didn't abandon anything once a project or once an idea or once a thought or once a job appeared or I was confronted with that. I stayed with it until it was finished, and finished to my satisfaction. To this day, that is something that I carry forth. The idea of perfection. I'm a perfectionist by for my own self. I can understand flaws and maybe differences in others, but I'm a greatest critic of myself. I'm very, very critical of myself, but I'm patient and understanding with others.
What led you to build your home in Lakeville?
Well, when I had the opportunity to accept a position here, I had known of Lakeville from my youth, known of it as a very, very small town, and I felt it was close to where my parents lived on the farm in Scott County and close to where my wife's parents lived in Montgomery, so we weren't venturing, again, very far away. So I thought it would be a good fit, small town. I did have some distant relatives that were living here and acquaintances that my parents knew and my wife's parents knew. So it wasn't that we were in a brand new town or community. We did know some people. I thought the school was very, very welcoming to young teachers with families. I remember the first house that I rented actually, and it was just a couple feet from the school where I was teaching, and that is now currently McGuire Middle School. That was the original building in which I taught, and there was a house just a few feet away behind the bus garages now that I rented for 1 year, and it was nice. I spent a lot of time preparing in the school. I could just walk over there on weekends, and I think that started my my idea of being thoroughly prepared, because the facility at which I was teaching was so close. So on weekends I can walk over and do some work, and that was important. Then the following year we bought a house, the house that we're still in today.
What were the landmarks in this community at that time?
Well, of course, probably the big recreation area was the Antlers Park area and Lake Marion. At the time that I moved here, it still was in private hands, held by private individuals. The downtown, of course, was kind of the landmark at the time. A lot of businesses down there, and most of the people in the area were close to the downtown. There was no development in the northern part of our community back then, around 1970. That came later. And of course, a lot of activity centered around the schools. The schools were growing, and so those were kind of the landmarks, the downtown areas, schools, and of course, Lake Marion was known for a recreational area. And since then, of course, we have a lot of other parks in the area. But we were, I think, back in 1970, and from there on, I think the City Council recognized, because we had open space, we better preserve it, and so they've done a good job, I think, of preserving open space.
Can you expand on your career move to Bloomington?
Right. As I indicated, I began teaching in Lakeville in 1963. I stayed here 7 years until 1970. And then in 1970, I accepted a position with the Bloomington school system. I still, of course, lived here, but my first position was in Lincoln High School in Bloomington. And I stayed there teaching math, social studies, and some business courses. I stayed there until it closed in 1982. When it closed in 1982, I accepted a position at Kennedy High School in Bloomington. Then I finished my career there. I retired from the Bloomington school system in 1996 after a total of 33 years in teaching. But only, and it's kind of interesting, over all that period of time, I taught in only 3 different buildings, and that's kind of unusual, I think, in the teaching profession. So, and that was kind of nice. The adjustments were minimal during that period of time, and it was very very enjoyable. The drive, certainly back then, and even when I retired, wasn't bad. Although I got up at 4:30 in the morning, would get to school to prepare, and there was no traffic, obviously, then, and then leave about 3:30 or so to come back here to Lakeville after I had been on the council and, of course, mayor. So I didn't experience the traffic that you see now, so and that was nice.
Now, the subject area that you taught was?
I have degrees in math, social studies, and business.
Can you put your finger on the inner drive that kept your career alive for 33 years?
Well, I think the main thing with anybody in the teaching profession is you want students to learn, and you love the times when they are receptive and they want to learn. And you have to use a variety of techniques, and I like to have fun. I like to think of myself as kind of a jokester and having fun, and being prepared all the time and encouraging students. I knew what it was like not to know something, because that was my desire to learn, and when I didn't know something, I knew how that felt. And because of that, I knew how students felt when they didn't know. They might say they knew, but I knew that they didn't know, and so I would take my time to thoroughly explain concepts and so forth, particularly in math. Math was a very, very wonderful subject, because there's always a right or wrong answer there, and you have to get to the right answer. And I really enjoyed that, thoroughly explaining something with the idea of enforcing it and selling a concept to the students. So I think that's the thing that kept me going. I always wanted to be thoroughly prepared. I know my family used to tease me about on weekends, Sundays particularly, I'd spend Sundays preparing for the next week. And but I think you really have to be thoroughly prepared. Students, I think, appreciate that when they know that the teacher is thoroughly prepared, and the teacher has taken that time to prepare. Therefore, they should take time to learn.
Are there students over your 33-year career that stand out?
Well, I don't want to single out anybody, and I won't. But I will say this. One of the nicest things that's happening is even today, former students will come up and identify themselves and tell me what a wonderful time they had in my class and what they have learned. I see that all the time. Even former students from Lakeville. The other night at a council meeting, I had several former students there. And the same thing in Bloomington. Students I had are moving out here, and the reason they're moving out here is because they want, to some degree, to have the feeling that they had when they were in Bloomington and growing up. So they come to Lakeville because it's a growing community. And I have many former students that are here and reside, and they come up to me and say hi on a regular basis, and that's nice to know. So I won't mention any names because I'll miss somebody and I'll hear about it. So.
When you retired from teaching, what type of feelings did you have at that moment?
Well, I guess I was fortunate to have this position as mayor to fall back on. I know when I was teaching, I was so focused on teaching that some of the side issues that related to the city of Lakeville or being mayor didn't bother me as much, because I knew that my main focus had to be on teaching. And that was a nice thing to have, because I could take whatever issue that was bothering me from the point of view of being mayor, and I could focus more on my teaching, and that wouldn't bother me as much. Well, now that I don't teach, I don't have that direct focus on a particular occupation. all the broad issues that relate to Lakeville are things that I'm concerned about, and they do bother me. And it's one thing to be retired from a profession, a career, and it's quite another to have a broad spectrum of responsibilities and issues that now you can deal with. But I'm finding that because I retired, I'm taking on a lot more in the way of going to meetings and issues and becoming acquainted with them. And the people that are going to be elected from now on in city councils, it's going to be a difficult job because they've got their own careers to worry about, they've got families to worry about, they've got other things to take care of. It's going to be very, very difficult. I was fortunate in the sense that I'd retired for a number of years, that I could do all these extra things, and I'm happy that I did that. But it was getting to a point where, with teaching and with being mayor, one had to go. Unfortunately, I retired, and so I could still continue to do this.
You mentioned that there was a parallel time period when you were a teacher and you were serving as a planning commission member, council member, and mayor. Can you share with us why you got involved as a planning commission member?
Well, that's an interesting question. Around 1970, after I transferred, to Bloomington, prior to that, I'd been involved in church activities. As a matter of fact, I was the director of what we call the CCD classes, the Confraternity of Christian Doctrine, and I was responsible for recruiting teachers to teach classes in the evenings to students. And so I was quite involved in that activity. And when I transferred up to Bloomington to accept the position there, I kind of, I guess, decreased my involvement in that activity for the church. And my wife said to me one day, after seeing an ad in the paper for chartering a JC chapter in Lakeville, she said, "Well, why don't you get involved in that?" And I thought, well, I probably could do that. I knew some of the people that were going to charter the JC chapter, and so I went to the meeting where they were organizing, and there were 11 of us at the meeting getting organized. And of course, as you know, with organizations such as this, you need a sponsoring chapter, and Farmington JCs were sponsoring us. And at the meeting, we talked about the different offices that would be needed to be filled. And I think at that time, with the board of directors, the president, you got a secretary, you got a treasurer, you got a historian, and probably others. There were probably 10 offices that needed to be filled, and there were 11 members, potential members of the organization there. And everybody got an office except you-know-who. I was odd person out, I guess, and so I did not have an office. The rest of the group looked around and says, "Oh my gosh, we have to create one for Duane." After I got involved in JCs, some of the JCs were members of the council or were born and raised in Lakeville. And they were involved in the planning commission to some extent, and there was an opening on the planning commission, and somebody asked me if I'd be interested in that, and I said, yes, I would be. And of course, through an interview process and talking to people, I got appointed. I probably was the youngest member of the planning commission at that time, and it was kind of interesting. We had, quote, the good old boys, and kind of an outsider, even though I was born and raised less than 20 miles away. And they would, tell me what was up and what was right and what was wrong. One of the interesting things at that time, the planning commission would choose a person to present their recommendations to the city council. Now we have staff do that, but at the time they would select a member of the planning commission. And depending on the issue, if the issues were really easy, the older members of the planning commission would do that, because that's not a problem. But any issue that's going to be controversial, you know who they selected. Right. And so I got my baptism in front of the city council presenting issues that were controversial. And because of my inexperience, I didn't know a whole lot about those issues. And so that taught me a lesson. You better learn, you better read, you better know before you make a presentation of that nature to the city council. So then I realized that, yes, it takes a lot of background experience, study, and knowledge, even in city government as an elected official, to make a presentation or to try and get a solution to a particular problem.
What led you to become a city council member?
Well, after I was on the Planning Commission for 1 year, and of course at the time the council said, when they appointed me to the Planning Commission, it's only a couple meetings, not to worry about it. So I was on the Planning Commission, and there was a vacancy on the City Council. And the members of the City Council talked to me about that. They thought, well, I might be a good fit for the City Council. And I said, yeah, I just can't do that. I mean, I've got teaching, my responsibilities, and some other activities. And he said, oh, it's only a couple meetings, not to worry about it. And so I was interviewed again for a position on the City Council, and was selected to fill the vacancy on the City Council. It was just a 1 year, and then I ran after that for a 4-year term, was elected. I ran again for another 4-year term, was elected. At the end of that time, which would have been the 8th year serving, there was a vacancy. The mayor got elected to a state legislative position in the House of Representatives, and so there was a vacancy on his term, and I was, the rest of the council picked me to fill out that vacancy, and that was for mayor. And after that year, then I decided to run, and ran, I think it was 8 times for mayor, 2 times prior to that in the City Council, and then 8 times for mayor, so total of 10 elections.
And just a reminder that on our next edition of Messages, I understand that you were acting mayor a couple of times before you became mayor. Can you share with us those experiences?
Well, that did happen. I think it was in the month of September when I was notified that the mayor at the time left and had moved out of state and would not be coming back to fill out his term. And so again, being, I believe, the senior member of the council, I was acting mayor, and then filled out the month of September, October, November, and December. Now in November, his term would have been up, and so there was an election. Now I could have run for mayor. I was on the council at the time. So I could have run for mayor, but I think what happened was another person surfaced to run who had been involved in local politics before that, and so I thought, well, I'm not going to, make a big issue out of this. I'll let that person run for mayor. That person did run with some opposition from other people, and then was selected. So I became, quote, I was acting mayor, but assumed the duties for several months until the new mayor took office, which was in January. So there was the September, October, November, and December. And then again, a situation developed where the mayor got elected to the House of Representatives in the middle of his term. There was 1 year left, and then I was, because I was acting mayor, I filled out that term then as mayor, and then I did run from that point on.
I understand that the Planning Commission and City Council met in some interesting locations prior to the building of our new City Hall. Can you share with us those locations?
Well, the first time that I got involved, our Planning Commission meetings and the council meetings were held at what was City Hall Fire Station, the only building we really had, and that is where now Dispatch Industries has their building downtown. And the meetings would run rather long. Every committee had to give a report, and it was not only a meeting of business, but it was a social meeting kind of as well, because a lot of people would gather there and talk into the wee hours of the morning. Those are some rather long meetings. That we did sell that building to Dispatch through kind of a redevelopment process, and then City Hall was relocated in the downtown area in an old bank building. And we built a new fire station, the one that now is across from our current City Hall. That was a fire station we built, and City Hall was in the old bank building. And we stayed in that bank building, the old bank building, downtown Lakeville, where we had all of our offices basically, except Public Works, which was out in the Air Lake Industrial Park. We stayed there till the late 1980s before we built the new City Hall. So those were the buildings that we used at the time. Our police station, probably have heard the story, our police station, which is a tiny little old township garage that was used as a police station. And since then, of course, we've grown so much that we needed proper facilities and adequate facilities, and hopefully we have those now. So, but we used a variety of buildings, and no public address system, no PA, no overheads or anything. It was just basic, very, very basic. We would set up just before the council meeting with tables and chairs, and then we have to take them down afterwards again.
Is there a particular item that you found difficult to deal with?
One of the ones that I remember, it was small at the time in the context of the entire community. We had to put in a lot of improvements, sewer and water and new streets and things of this nature. All of those were somewhat contentious. Everybody knew that it was necessary to do these things. But one project that we did, relatively small, as I mentioned, in the context of the community, was improving a road in the western part of our community. By improving it, it was the blacktop, because some people thought it should be blacktop. It was a gravel road, and it was washboardy and dusty. And so we did receive a petition from some people to improve the road. And we thought, at the time, the council thought, well, that would be nice. It's probably a slam dunk. Let's just see. And we, are required to have the hearings and everything. And so we were of the mind that vast majority of the people would be in support of that, knowing that they'd have to participate and would be assessed for the project. So when it came to the public hearing, the room was full of opposition. And we weren't prepared for that because we had no idea that many people would oppose it. And as it played out after a couple meetings, 50% favored it and 50% were opposed. And of an issue that, as I mentioned, relatively small in the context of the community, that was the most agonizing thing I think that I went through, because there would be no winners in a situation like that. We did proceed to do the project, and it played out all right, but boy, that was an agonizing time for me. I received calls when I was teaching during the day, people very, very upset, irate, and then I'd receive calls for people who wanted it. And you're torn. If you want to satisfy the demands of people, when it's a 50-50 situation, it's very, very tough. And as an elected official, I think we try not to look at our personal feelings as much as what is the feeling of a community, of a neighborhood. Try and keep our personal feelings out of it. And if a person can do that, I think that's important. But in situations where it's a toss-up, it's difficult to go through.
Do you see yourself as a visionary?
Yes. Yeah, I am still to this day very concerned about the future of Lakeville, what is going to happen. I know the issues on the horizon that are facing us as a region. And I really think the people that are going to serve now as elected officials in Lakeville are going to have to look at issues that transcend just the boundaries of Lakeville. Their first priority is to the citizens and residents of the community, but there are going to be so many issues of a regional nature, from transportation, housing, the economy, and education, that not only affect us but our neighbors as well here in the region. So we're going to have to, I think, work very, very closely with our neighbors on issues that affect all of us.
Two items that stand out as particularly difficult to deal with were the North Park water tower issue and the new City Hall city bonds. Can you share with us those experiences and how you grew from them?
The North Park water tower, obviously very, very controversial, particularly for the residents in the area. And I think we could understand why that would be, because they moved there. A lot of people were moving in at the time, and there was no indication that there'd be a water tower in that area. The growth did dictate that that was the best place to have a water tower, and true residents were very, very concerned. That was one of the first times that we really did work, we felt, very closely with the majority of the residents. The residents, most of them were very, very understanding of this, and felt that yes, there probably was a need for it, but why there? And we had to be very, very, I think, careful in the explanation of our whole pattern of where we have water towers sited and wells and things of this nature. And as I mentioned, I think a majority of them did understand. They did not necessarily approve, but for the entire benefit of the community and trying to use property that we did have, I think it turned out all right. We're still, you know, there are people that still, I think, probably feel that it was a bad decision, but in the long run, I think it's fine. For the bonds and the financing of City Hall, the one thing that people were concerned about is the fact that they didn't have a chance to vote on that. We used a rather unique financing technique that was available to us, bond defeasance and the proceeds from other bonds that we had issued, and the revenue that was generated from those bonds we used for partial payment on City Hall. That was difficult because obviously citizens are very, very conservative and very, very concerned anytime you build a new facility. We did receive a lot of complaints about, well, you know, the public didn't have a chance to vote on things of this nature. One of the things that I think the City Council has done over the years, because of council members being very, very concerned, is they want to make sure that the revenue stream is there without taxing our residents or businesses in an extreme nature. And so we still look for revenue streams that are available. And in this particular case, there was one that we did use. We have used in past years revenue generated from our liquor store operation. People are very concerned about the fact that we operate a liquor store. We know that we can control the consumption, or the purchase, rather, of liquor in the community by having control of the stores, but there still are those that say this is a conflict here. You know, you own liquor stores, and then on the one hand, you're trying to tell a community to reduce consumption or purchase of alcohol. But the upside is the tremendous amount of revenue that's generated that can be used, income that can be used for projects in the city.
Heritage Commons, the Dakota County Heritage Library, Fire Station 1, and City Hall all have very common architecture. Can you share with us how that was agreed upon?
I think the City Hall facility started what we felt we must have buildings that are kind of uniform, that set forth kind of an architectural design for an area, like a campus type. And so with the building of City Hall, it started. We kind of remodeled the fire station. The police station came on board before we had the City Hall, and the architecture was always just a little different depending on the building. And I think we wanted to tie that together, and so we believe we've done that. The same thing with the building here, the library, a very important addition to what we could call it kind of a campus atmosphere around here, including housing. We, I think, felt that we need to preserve some of the heritage that existed in the past, and through architecture you can do that. Another area that I feel very positive about is our new arts facility. That's not going to be a new building, but it's a facility that for an arts and arts center that is going to be a very, very positive addition to the community.
Do you feel you've accomplished what you wanted to achieve during your tenure as mayor and city council member?
Well, it isn't the point that I accomplished what I wanted to. One of the things that I've learned is that for any community to be successful, you have people on the council, elected officials, who work together and never take a particular issue to a point where it causes conflict with others. And I think our city councils over the years have done that. They have taken concerns. They've taken concerns and have united, modified perhaps the concern, united in their efforts and promoted it. The things that I personally would want in my own life, I don't think are as important as the things that this community wants. And those are the things that I've tried to get council members and mayors when I was on the council to see, to look to. You know, let's not be I all the time. How about the we in the community I think that's important, and I think we've done a pretty good job of that. I don't think there's any council member, past or present, that feels that they weren't appreciated by other council members or mayors. I really think we've done a good job of soliciting input and then arriving at some consensus that all of us can promote and all of us can feel comfortable with. And I think we've done. It's the image oftentimes of elected officials that carries forth to the image of the community. And I'm most proud of my fellow council members throughout the years and the mayors that I've worked for. And one unique thing, all the years I've been involved, I've only there's only been 3 city administrators, and the very first one lasted only 6 months. So I suppose we could say only 2 city administrators. And that's, I think, kind of indicative of the working of a community too, as well, the cohesiveness of a community, the cohesiveness of the council. And for 2 administrators to be involved over all those years, I think is rather unique and very positive.
Now, I know you're an avid reader and an avid golfer. Can you share with us your hobbies?
Yeah, reading is really important to me, and I guess that dates back to my background, not being the wealthiest farmers in the area. I needed to learn a lot, and books were rare. Check them out from the school library, and I valued reading. I was not always a very good reader when I was growing up, and so I had to work on that. I would just deliberately read, and I learned that I like to read. I like nonfiction. I do not like fiction. I read a lot of nonfiction, a lot of books on leadership and management, and books dealing with the economy. Books that I'm reading right now kind of deal with leadership and the economy and government. But I have probably more books in my house than perhaps anybody else in the community. I mean, we're talking, I hate to say this, but probably 1,000. I have a lot of books. And if somebody wants to take them, they can. So that's always been important to me, reading. Just so much knowledge to be gained from reading. And that was the vehicle through which we learned when I was growing up. Now, there are other vehicles, as you know, the internet and so forth, but you still have to read. Golfing, so reading is number 1. Golfing is number 2, probably. I've learned to take up golfing. Wife and I go out, as much as 3 times a week or 2-3 times a week, and we do love that. Not getting any better at it, but we do love it. It's good exercise and it's a lot of fun.
Did you ever think your public service would last this long?
No, never. I remember the first time that I got elected. It was for a 4-year term, and I said, after I got elected, I said, you know something? Our daughter, I said this to my wife, our daughter will have graduated from high school by the time I finish my term. I think she was 15 or 16 at the time. I thought, wow, that's a long time. And then I ran again at the insistence of people. I never really, wanted to do this, but I was encouraged to do it, so I ran again. And then when I became mayor, it was only a 2-year term for mayor, and so people would say, you got to run. I said, yeah, okay, it's 2 years, another 2 years, another 2 years. I never thought it would last this long. No way. It was never planned to last this long. So, no way. If someone had said, that you're going to be in elected office 26 years in your lifetime, I'd have said, you're crazy. Absolutely no way. But, it happened. I'm happy for it and grateful for the people that supported me and worked for me and encouraged me.
In 1994, the League of Minnesota Cities honored you with their C.C. Ludwig Award for Outstanding Municipal Service. What went through your mind when you won that award?
Well, that was a shock. I knew I'd been nominated, and I know it would have been tough. I was still teaching and was involved in the activities of the League and some other organizations. Never expected that whatsoever. Because I knew I was nominated, I thought, well, there's probably the most remote chance that I might get it. And it was the recognition was held in St. Paul, and I know a lot of people have been invited. I didn't know this at the time, but a lot of my friends and relatives were invited for the actual, ceremony. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go, but I'm not going to expect anything. Well, I got there, and when I was walking around, somebody said, "Congratulations." And then they realized, uh-oh, they shouldn't have said that. So then I thought, I wonder what they're talking about. Is it something else? So I thought, just to be prepared, I prepared 2 speeches, and one in case I won, and one in case I didn't. And of course, you know me, I was going to have a little fun. When it was announced, I got up there and I deliberately pulled out the wrong speech. And I read, the speech where I didn't get it, and it was kind of funny. Everybody knew what I was doing. But that was quite a surprise because my family was there. My son from California and daughter from Iowa. So that was kind of nice. But in recognition of the fact that I got that award, I really did feel that during my retirement years from teaching, the 4 years where I was from teaching, but still mayor, that I would give back to all organizations an extra effort because of being recognized.
Can you share with us any advice you might have for the person that replaces you as the mayor of the city of Lakeville?
One of the things that's going to be very difficult for anybody is the fact that these people have full-time jobs. The men or women that are going to serve on the city council or as mayor have full-time jobs. Most of them have families and other commitments. It's going to be very, very difficult. What they need to do is they really need to get to the staff members and get to their fellow council members and help each other understand issues. Don't go it alone. You can't go it alone, but you have to go to each other to help understand issues. And listen to, I think, what the community might be saying through our community survey. There's always a good direction there. Never feel that it is us against them. That's a feeling that oftentimes certain council members in different communities have. It's the council against the community. It's us against them. And there's always a tendency to get there, and I think that should never happen. And always respect each other, whether it's the mayor and council members. Respect. Allow the council members to say what they want to say. Respect it. As a mayor, one of the things a mayor has to do is to take everything, all input, and kind of embellish it, modify it to fit what might be a good, positive outcome. And I think the person that replaces me will have that understanding, I'm sure. If they understand a little bit of the history of how we got to where we are and what are the things, or what were the things that got us there, I think we'll be in fine shape.
I know you and Mary have some definite plans for the future. Can you share those with us?
Well, we'll be spending probably as much as 5 months down in Florida. We bought a small little place in Winter Haven, just south of Orlando. Sunshine all the time during the 5 months. Right on a golf course, a lot of activities down there. It's a retirement community made up mostly of upper Midwest people. About the 500 units, dwellings in the community, about 60% are from Minnesota. A lot of people that were in public service, educators, people in city government, county government, state government are in this community. So it's a nice, it'll be a nice break. I'll be away for a while, but then come back to Lakeville for 7 months and participate and complain to the city council.
Well, any final thoughts?
No, I've been very fortunate. I've been probably the most blessed person in Lakeville during the years that I've been here. Things have gone very well. I've been lucky. Wonderful family support. We'll get to see them a lot more now than ever before. A wife who has supported me a lot, and I should tell this story. A lot of people have heard about it. You know, when I first got involved 26 years ago, we didn't have staff. I didn't have a person that could schedule where I was to be or to write letters and so forth. And so my wife helped me out a lot, and she kind of kept me organized throughout all this. And I've kind of still count on her, even to this day. I have her do things for me. And a couple months ago, I think it was, I had to go someplace and I needed some records, I needed some documents, I needed this. I knew I had it at home because I have everything at home, and I just couldn't find it. So she found it for me, and I was so grateful to her, and she looked at me and says, "Duane, what would you ever do if I left you?" And I looked at her and said, "I think I'd have to go along." So anyway, that's it. But I've been extremely blessed. I'm so glad and so happy. So.
Well, on behalf of our department, and I know many residents will probably share their thanks for your service over the next few months, but it truly has been a pleasure to work with you. You are truly a champion for the city of Lakeville, and thanks for your service.
Well, thank you, and thank you very much for having me on the program.
Thanks. Once again, we'd like to take this opportunity to thank Mayor Duane Zaun for taking the time to sit down with us for this interview. And we also want to remind you that as we look forward on the Messages program, a two-part interview with Councilmember Betty Sint will be coming your way on upcoming Messages editions.
Good evening, Mayor Zaun and Councilmember Sint. On behalf of the City Council, former members of the City Council, and councilmembers-elect, I've been asked to step forward and say a few words about your transition from public service to other exciting things that are going to happen in your lives. And we just want to share some of our feelings and comments, and just acknowledge just some of the things that you've done that are so special, and in the many years that you've contributed your time and talent to this community. It is certainly my privilege to stand here this evening to begin this special recognition. And as my mother taught me, Betty, it's ladies first. So we'll start with Councilmember Sint this evening. And what I'd like to do, Betty, is first place the plaque. So those in the audience and the viewers at home can gain a appreciation of the significant amount, the significant years of service, 20 years of service, Betty, which is just very, very significant. And engraved on this plaque, which states, "In grateful appreciation, the City of Lakeville recognizes Councilmember Elizabeth Betty Sint for dedicated service 1980 through the year 2000. And there are numerous engraved items that portray achievements during your public service, but also we've identified some of the personal accomplishments as a member of the City Council in various organizations that you've served as a member of the City Council, going way beyond the call of duty, and stepping forward in the regional and the statewide arena, and doing so many important things that have certainly benefited this community as well. The plaque, Betty, is something that you have viewed previously. I want those in the audience this evening and the viewers at home to know that your 8 children hosted a gathering recently at the Senior Center, and we celebrated not only your retirement from the City Council, but we celebrated your 70th birthday, and it was wonderful. And I just would like to take this moment to tell you how very proud your children are, and of you and all the things that you've accomplished. And they're not with us this evening, but they were there for that special day, and I know they're with us in spirit. And I also want to acknowledge that there's another very special person who's a close friend and your mate for many decades, and Clarence, and I know Clarence is here in spirit. I just know he is. Betty, I just want to briefly acknowledge some of the most significant accomplishments and There are just so many, but I've selected these personally because I believe they represent the essence of your commitment and your tireless efforts to accomplish so many things during these past 2 decades. The very reason that you got on the city council is you felt the civil defense emergency siren system was not adequate, and you said, I'm going to do something about it, and I'm going to make sure that every mobile home park in this city has a shelter. And you kept your promise, and not only do we have an excellent civil defense emergency system, but we're constantly upgrading and adding additional sirens. In fact, there's another one in the budget that's before you this evening for 2001, and there's another one after that in 2002. So we continue to upgrade a system that you were in large part responsible for as you ran for election. I think you always tell me that you won by 47 votes. I got a good memory. I know you're an avid reader, and you're very proud of our new library, and I just want to indicate how hard that you worked on that project. You're also very committed to life cycle housing, and you have lived in a number of different types of housing in your lifetime. You've told me that. There's been mobile homes, and you've lived in single-family homes, and more recently you're living in one of the community development agencies' senior housing projects. But you are instrumental in supporting and ensuring quality senior housing in our community with Windsor, the Phase 1, Phase 2, Fairfield Terrace, and now the new senior housing project in downtown Lakeville that's under construction, and it's got your fingerprints all over those projects. You've really worked hard on them. Another area that you were deeply involved with, not only locally, but on the county level and the state level, and the Metropolitan Council regional level, was recycling, the recycling program. And I know that's something very important to you, and you're a tireless advocate of that. And the person that you work so closely with here in the city is John Hennon, and I know that you had a real close working relationship and achieved great things in that program on a citywide basis. You're responsible for the Manufactured Home Community Program. Another one of your initiatives was the biennial budget process, and the budget that's being considered tonight is a biennial budget 2001-2002, and it really has made a profound difference in how we look at fiscal matters, and I know you feel good about that, and as you should, and it's really led to being able to manage our resources very effectively. The viewers at home are enjoying this transmission, this broadcast, this evening on Channel 16, and you were very involved, you and members of your family were very involved in the cable TV franchise, but more importantly, you've been a real advocate of the government Channel 16. And the viewers at home should also know that you've been an advocate for getting planning commission meetings on the television and live on camera, and you've accomplished that as well, and I know that's something individuals are appreciating. You're also one of several advocates to bring the silent witness program here, and this followed a tragedy in the community involving a resident who was not treated very well in a very unfortunate situation, and you wanted to bring awareness to that, so everybody knows that what happens when spouses become battered and sometimes reach unfortunate crossroads in their lives, and this was something that really touched you, and I know that you were very involved in that. Let's move on to some achievements, personal highs that rarely occur in the political life of any council member, elected council member. As the viewers and those in the audience will learn tonight, it is extremely rare. In fact, I was talking to the executive director of the League of Minnesota Cities, Jim Miller, and there's only one other city in the history of the League of Minnesota Cities' existence that has 2 council members that have received the C.C. Ludwig Award. And you are one of them, and Mayor Zaun is the other individual, and that is just speaks highly of your many contributions over your 2 decades, and I might add, you received a C.C. Ludwig Award, and you only had 15 years of service in, so it was well-deserved and recognized by your peers throughout the state. And to put that into context, I just want to remind the viewers that there are 852 cities in Minnesota, so for only 2 cities out of 852 to have a mayor and a council member to receive the C.C. Ludwig Award is a remarkable achievement. You've served as the mayor pro tem. Another significant achievement, I know something you're very proud of. Maybe the viewers and those in the audience were not aware that you are a nurse and a professional, qualified nurse, and have used those skills and knowledge to serve on the Elf Ambulance Board. You're a charter member, and to my knowledge, you've served approximately 15 years, and you'll be recognized a little later this evening for that, for your many contributions to that organization. You served on the City Hall Building Committee, and that was about 12 years ago, and ensured that the community would have a meaningful symbol for its local government, a place where people could feel that meetings are open, people are welcome, and that people would be appropriately served and treated well, and I think you've provided the foundation for that building, and now it's being expanded, and you were on that committee as well. You're on the League of Minnesota Cities Board of Directors, and you were a charter member in the Minnesota Women in City Government. And one of the last things I want to reference, and there could be, I could go on all evening, but the last I want to mention was so very important to you, and that was your involvement in the Lakeville Heritage Day and the creation of Pioneer Park and the recognition of Mr. White as part of that. And I know that was very important to you. It was very, very appropriate the manner in which you organized that and were involved in that process. I just want to say in closing, Betty, that as a representative of the city staff, I just want you to know how much we've appreciated your commitment. You're always there, and if someone needed to fill in and go to a meeting and represent the community, you're always willing to step forward, and we appreciate all the time that you gave and the energy that was exerted in that process. And you always put the city first, Betty. You always did. And I think you always will. With that, in addition to this plaque, Betty, I'd like to put on the screen you're viewing the keepsake that is being presented by the members of the City Council to you this evening. I'm going to hand that to you as the viewers are seeing it at home, so you have personal keepsake commemorative, acknowledging your years of service with the Lakeville logo is a part of that. Also, both you and Mayor Zaun will be receiving videotapes of the recent interview that's been on the Message Show, where Jeff Leaders had interviewed each of you, and we're going to provide copies for each of you and each member of your, and for the members of your family. And Betty, 8 isn't too many, so Duane will make sure that you receive 3 or whatever number would be appropriate to give to family and friends. And that was a wonderful interview, and I've watched it a couple times, and it was well done, and really puts your service into perspective, and also is anecdotal as well. With that, I would like to turn this program now over briefly to Farmington Council Member Steve Strand, who would like to make a presentation along with another board member from Elf Ambulance, and as well as the executive director. Mr. Strand?
Thanks. I don't get to come up and say that I get to go to Arizona for the winter, so I'm not very happy about that. But good evening, Mayor and Council. Hopefully most of you know me. My name is Steve Strand, and I'm here tonight wearing the hat of a council member from your neighboring city of Farmington, as well as a board member and past chair of the ALF Ambulance Board. And we wanted to add our voices to your recognition of Councilmember Sint tonight. City Administrator Erickson talked a little bit about this, but when he talked about the civil defense sirens and how people say, somebody should do something about that. How many times have we heard people say, somebody should do something about taxes, or somebody should do something about that road? Somebody should organize some people. And it's easy to say somebody should do this. It's hard to do it. And that's what Betty Sint has done for 20 years as a member of the City Council. She's done the hard work. She's done the administrative heavy lifting that it takes to get things done. Back in the mid-'80s, as I think all of you know, some people had an idea that rather than use a private ambulance service, we should do it ourselves. We should create our own ambulance service between 3 cities. We could do it better and cheaper and faster, but that meant somebody had to step up and start it from scratch. There were no buildings, there were no people, there were no ambulances. Betty Sint, through her stewardship, has helped to create ALF Ambulance Service, a very cost-effective, excellent ambulance service, and lives have been saved because Betty did the hard work. City Administrator Erickson also talked a little bit about public service. Words like public service, words like commitment, leadership, they're sort of overused. They lose their meaning over time because we hear it so much. But think about those 3 words, or those 3 phrases: public service, leadership, commitment, and I think they really apply to the things that Betty Sint has done for our community, and not just for Lakeville, for our entire area, our whole community. She doesn't do it for glory, because there's not much of that. She doesn't do it for fame, because there's not much of that. She certainly doesn't do it for money. She does it because she cares, and she cares for people in this community. I would like to recognize her as a colleague on the ALF board. I'd like to recognize her as an employee of the City of Lakeville, but most of all as a citizen of this area. Our communities, all of our communities, are better, they are more livable, they are safer places because Betty Sint did the hard work. To present just a small symbol of our esteem and our thanks, I'd like to bring up our Executive Director, Kevin Ron, as well as our representative from Apple Valley, council member from Apple Valley, Jenny Sterling.
Your Honor, council members, citizens of Lakeville, Betty, I had an opportunity to go back through the files. I had to, because it's been a number of years, and to look at how the ambulance service was put together, and as Councilmember Strand so eloquently pursued it. It was the cities were in need of a quicker service, a service that was there and responsive to the needs of all of its citizens. And you, with your healthcare professional background as a nurse, brought that integrity and credibility to the organization. You, as cities, began meeting in late 1984. You had your first board meeting on June 20th, 1985, and the rest is history, so to speak. We've come a long ways, and you were there as a charter member to help lead and guide the EMS system that now serves all the citizens of our communities. It's been a good experience, and I thank you, Betty. It's been many years, and I thank you for the leadership, counseling, guiding, and you'll be missed, but we'll be talking with you, and you know that. I'll turn it over to Jenny Sterling.
Betty, I've worked with you through the league and on the board of directors of Minnesota Women in City Government, and I'm just learning this. We're going to get this in Apple Valley, I found out. Uh-oh. Okay. Anyway, I enjoyed working with you. I met you about 10 years ago when I first got on the city council in Apple Valley, and we've worked together for 8 years on the ALF ambulance board. We finally have gotten the word ALF off the ambulance, and now it's Apple Valley, Lakeville, Farmington, so everybody knows where the ambulance is coming from. But I do wish you luck in your future endeavors, and you might want to join Mayor Zaun and I in Florida sometime, because it is warm down there. But this plaque that I'd like to present you tonight says that ALF Ambulance Operations Board hereby recognizes Betty Sint for your dedication and service as a charter board member on the Ambulance Operation Board, June 20th, 1985 through December 31st, 2000. And you still have one more board meeting. Just going to get this.
Thank you. Thank you, Jenny. Pleasure. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Kevin.
I would like to
say that the executive director of ALF Ambulance spoke so eloquently this evening, and why shouldn't he? He's a former student of mine.
Isn't everyone?
Isn't everyone, right? Okay.
I'd be glad to give him equal time.
No, those stories will come out later. All right. Robert, anything else?
Certainly my privilege to stand before the council this evening and recognize Mayor Duane Zaun. As I stated at a recent event, which was our annual advisory dinner, where more than 200 volunteers were in attendance, and they also paid tribute to both Councilmember Sint and Mayor Zaun. I had the opportunity to kind of speak from the heart, and I don't know if I could recapture that, Duane. I was pretty emotional that evening, but I want to say that it has been a rare privilege to be associated with a person of your caliber, providing the quality and the level of leadership that you have provided these past almost 17 years as our mayor. And I want to just restate what I said that evening and tell you that you are the envy of my colleagues as city administrators and city managers. So many of them have stepped forward and said, Bob, you're just so very fortunate to be able to work with Mayor Zaun, who has really distinguished himself and has provided so much continuity and outstanding leadership, and has really made governing look easy. Duane, you really make governing look easy. It's much more challenging than that, and it's been my pleasure to work closely with you these past 12 years. And every council meeting is a very important event for you. And I want to make sure I don't misuse the word event, but event in the context that you're always completely and totally prepared. You've researched everything closely. You've asked your usual 20 questions, and you come prepared to be a consummate parliamentarian, Duane, a consummate parliamentarian. There really probably is no one better than you in that particular category. You could clearly win the Oscar for that. This evening we're going to also present you a plaque for the many. Chris, if you could help me out here. And what it states, Duane, is that with grateful appreciation, the City of Lakeville recognizes you for your dedicated service as our mayor from 1983 to the year 2000, and as a council member from 1975 to 1982, and prior to that, a planning commission member for 2 years. It's just phenomenal that anybody would dedicate that much of their life to the well-being of a community. In fact, Duane, when your wife, Mary, became the first lady, my wife and I, Shelley and I, had only been married 10 years, and so as a couple that has been in public service, we have a full and complete appreciation for the work that you've done, Duane, and the support that Mary has given you throughout your public service career. So I think what we need to do right now, and she's not going to like this, but I'm going to have her step forward because I think the viewing public needs to know Mary Zaun, who, to my knowledge, has never been at this podium previously, and I think the community needs to just make sure that they know Mary, and we can all give her the appropriate recognition that she's so deserving of for the few phone calls that she probably has received over the last almost 30 years. Mary, step forward. I know you're going to appreciate this a lot.
That's not very nice of you.
So it's my privilege and it's my pleasure to introduce Mayor Zaun, good friend and mate and supporter of Mayor Zaun, and I know you've always agreed on all the political issues.
Oh, absolutely.
Anybody who knows you knows that, Mary. So, but I'd like you to just go around and shake everybody's hand like all of our special guests get to do, and even the person in the middle if you want to. Well, you see, I didn't let Mary say anything.
Thank you, Mary.
Oh, I know Mary, so I'm not gonna. Maybe later. Thanks, Mary. We have Councilmember Sint and Mayor Zaun have something in common. They both are avid readers. The difference is Betty reads fiction and Duane reads only nonfiction. And we're looking forward to building the mayor's library, wherever that might be, because there are thousands of editions, I've been told, of books that could be placed on the shelf, because the mayor is an avid reader, primarily of nonfiction, and an occasional zoning handbook he reads. If you can imagine getting excited about reading a zoning handbook.
Is that fiction or nonfiction?
A little of each. I would like just to walk through some of what I believe, and I selected these personally, so it represents my 12 years working with you, Duane. I certainly want to take this moment to acknowledge my predecessor, who also had the privilege of working with you. I know that he placed a call to you today, and I just want you to know how much Pat McGarvey appreciated working with you, and this is a good time to just make sure that you know that, and I want to say that publicly. Duane, you and I spent a lot of meetings in Hastings to ensure that there would be a library here, the Dakota County Heritage Library, and I know that with your background as an educator and with your vast academic background, double master's degree, the bachelor's degree, I believe they're in economics, well, at least I know one's in ag economics.
Right.
And the other one helped me out, math.
That's correct.
There I did, I remembered that. And that's benefited the community, especially in your official capacity as weed inspector. That's been very helpful. On a serious note, though, let's move on to Heritage Commons, a project that was what has been important to you and continues to be important. I know you'll follow that as an extension of our historic downtown. Another project that is very important to you for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is preserving one of the most beautiful structures in our city, but that's the Lakeville Area Arts Center and the preservation of Hart Hall, the former All Saints Parish. The DARE program, Duane, I didn't keep track, but Chief Martens reminds me that there's only 1 or 2 DARE graduations you missed since the inception of the program. And we're talking 10 to 15 graduations a year, Duane, since its inception. So it's just an amazing commitment on your part, and it was something you felt strongly about. It goes back to your education, your professional background as an educator. Always being there at the youth safety camp. A big supporter of our public safety, particularly our fire department and our police department. You really had a knack for technology. And now Mary said she has trouble getting you off the internet to play golf in Florida. But honestly, you were instrumental in establishing our geographic information system. And you had the vision and knew that how it would benefit us globally. You were instrumental in helping us purchase the King Youth Athletic Complex, and I know Steve Machad and the Park and Recreation Advisory Committee is grateful. You were instrumental in enabling us to purchase the West Lake Marion Community Park. In both of these situations, Duane, your longstanding involvement in the community, your well-established and meaningful connections with individuals and families made it possible for us to acquire both of those properties. The comprehensive communications plan, you're a stickler for communications and you want people to know what's going on, and that's evident in everything you do and have been doing as mayor, whether it's on Channel 16, Air Lake News, the message page, and I just want to acknowledge that. You were personally responsible for the fiscal impact analysis which led to our first growth moratorium, and you were deeply involved in that process and worked very closely with now Lieutenant Schwartz, who had just completed his master's degree, and you were working closely with him to achieve that analysis to ensure that this community would be in good standing many years to come. And I'm sure that came from your math and economics background. The Strategic Growth Management Task Forces, you led both of them by giving the opening remarks, giving them their charge, and then what was so important about that is that then you and each member of the City Council chose to step aside and let the people do their work. And that was an impressive display of leadership, and you just established the mission and walked away and let them do their work, and it worked exceedingly well. And we are the envy of the Twin Cities because many have pursued similar analyses and or moratoriums. They've never been duplicated, but many people have taken that as a lead in proving their growth management. You have a love affair with the zoning ordinance. Some people like to read fiction, some people like to read nonfiction, some people like to read zoning ordinances, and you've always liked reading zoning ordinances, and it has really made you, it has really allowed you to be very prepared in being able to address concerns and issues that have surfaced here numerous times each year. You've always been there to recognize the employees at our employee service program, and we've appreciated that. Not only do you support the Meals on Wheels program, but you deliver meals as well, Duane. You also are a C.C. Ludwig Award winner, and you received that distinction in 1994 by your peer group. And again, I want to reiterate, only 2 cities out of 852 have ever had two elected officials receive that award. You served on the Planning Commission. You've been on the the Metro East Partnership Board. You've been on the recent Mayor's Task Force on Affordable Housing, which I believe you co-chaired with the Mayor of Minneapolis. You've been on the School District 194 Chemical Awareness Advisory Committee, and I believe you were a charter member and served on it for 15 years. You've been on the Coda City Heritage Village Finance Committee and Board of Directors. You continue to serve as a member of Lakeville Lions, and it's always a joy to go to beer brats and bingo and watch you and all the other Lions hold that annual Lakeville reunion, because that's what it is. It's a Lakeville reunion. You were past president of Lakeville JCs, and I can relate to that, and I've heard some great stories about that, and maybe we should have Jim Emond up and tell a few of those, or Dennis Feller. Probably not, but it's just you made so many contributions as a member of the JCs. How about being the Panaprog Grand Parade MC? Year after year, and I've had the pleasure of serving on the board, and as a past president, on behalf of Panaprog, I just want to thank you for your distinguished service in doing that each and every year. And even more significant, I believe, than that, Duane, would be the fact that you have emceed the Miss Lakeville Scholarship Pageant for
25 years.
25 years. Pretty amazing, and but it was all done with so much, with a great deal of professionalism, but always with a sense of humor, appropriately smattered into the process into what are known as Zaunisms. And no one will ever follow you in that regard, but I just want to acknowledge the distinction, the distinguished contributions that you made and continue to make, and we hope you will continue to do that to your ability and to the time available in being involved in Panaprog. This evening, your son John is here.
He did have to leave, I believe,
Okay,
along with
that's-
his wife. John's here? Where's John?
Back there.
Okay, but I did have, there
John,
he's,
step forward, please.
uh,
John is here, and you have another son, James, who lives in California, and Lori, who isn't here this evening, and she's in Iowa. And I know that they certainly are very proud of their father and all of the wonderful things that you've done. And I know that it's taken away from the time that you would have otherwise had available to do each and everything that each child expects from their parents. But I understand that they really weren't shortchanged, and there was great time, great quality time, great family, and certainly want to just let John say a few words if you'd like.
Well, I couldn't say any better, but, for all the time that he's been away, it just made us more proud to have him as a father. So we're all as proud as we can be of him, and there's humor within the family, too, and that got us through everything that we ever needed to get through. So just so proud.
thank you. Thank you very much. My other son, Jeff, couldn't make it because of the weather tonight, but otherwise he'd have been here, too.
We want to thank John and James and Lori for sharing their dad with the community. We're better for it, and I know that they're so very proud of you, Duane. With that, I'd like to turn this program over to Councilmember Lynette Mulvihill, who has some remarks that she's going to make from a former mayor.
I've been asked to read this letter on behalf of Ed Mako to you, Duane. It says, Mayor Zaun, unfortunately, I cannot be present at this important event, but as you know, it takes more than being in Germany to keep me from stating my opinion. And this time, Councilmember Mulvihill, the senior council person, is speaking for me. So you can't limit my comments to 3 minutes, as you did so unceremoniously the last time. Anyway, I suppose for the good of the city, I have to say something complimentary, and that won't take long. Oops, that doesn't sound exactly right. Seriously, Duane, at a time in our country's history when our politics, election procedures, and even our Supreme Court have been questioned, Lakeville can quite proudly say our city has benefited from the leadership of a conscientious, talented, and honest leader. Over the years, you fulfilled the duties of Planning Commission member, City Council member, and mayor with energy, with concern for the needs of the people, and with dignity. You have used your abilities as leader in guiding the City Council through the difficult process of decision-making without contentious public disputes. And finally, you have stood as an example of an elected official whose primary reason to be in office is to serve, not to acquire personal gain. Your reward for having served Lakeville all these years is the great learning experience you have had, and that is quite enough. The city of Lakeville has benefited for your having been our mayor. Thank you for many years of service. Former Lakeville City Council member and Mayor Ed Mako.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, Lynette. Just received on the fax less than 30 minutes ago this letter that I'm going to read, and it's from a close friend and an ally, and that is County Commissioner Paul Kraus. Dear Lakeville City Council members, thanks very much for allowing me an opportunity to weigh in on the festivities tonight in this way. Unfortunately, I had a scheduled conflict and couldn't be there with you except in spirit. I have to tell you that I think it's a great loss for Duane Zaun and Betty Sint to retire from city business, especially at the same time. It isn't that I blame them. We all need to take time to relax and enjoy life while we're still healthy enough to do it. But I'll certainly miss their leadership and friendship. Lakeville has grown tremendously since Duane and Betty started coming to the city council meetings. We've been very fortunate that two such talented and dedicated people have been willing to help shepherd our city through its growing pains over the last 2 decades and more. Personally, I've appreciated Duane and Betty's willingness to work with me, even when I was a rookie county commissioner, to establish an excellent working relationship between the City of Lakeville and Dakota County. Our intergovernmental partnership culminated, among other things, in our beautiful Heritage Library that's been open for less than a year. Duane and Betty, to me, you are the epitome of public service. You have set aside events with your families, scheduled vacations and school events around your work here, and have blocked out Monday nights for years and years. Enjoy your free time. You certainly earned it. I wish you the very best for both of you for the future. I hope to see both of you on the golf course soon. Paul Kraus. What I'd like to do now is our senior council member, Lynette Mulvihill, will make some remarks on behalf of City Council and the community, and then we're going to proceed from there to the unveiling of a very special commemorative.
He sees me on the golf course, his glasses changed.
I get the last word. I'm going to ask the audience to please excuse my back, but I'm going to address my comments to Duane and Betty. It's hard to believe that 11 years have passed since I first joined Duane and Betty on the City Council. As I reflected upon what I wanted to say this evening, I thought about how deceptive first impressions can be. Prior to serving on the council, I didn't know either Duane or Betty. I had, however, dealt briefly with them on a citizen issue in my neighborhood. As a participant in that issue, I helped deliver packets to some of the city council members, and Betty's packet was one that I delivered. As I drove up to her home, I noticed 3 big, brawny men in the front yard, at least one of whom had a beard, and I remember thinking, who is this woman, the local biker mama? Having now worked with Betty for 11 years, I can tell you I would put her up against a motorcycle gang any day, and my money would be on Betty. Betty and I became friends very quickly after I joined the council, and I gained genuine respect for her. She raised 8 children under sometimes adverse conditions. She enjoyed a very long, loving relationship with her husband, Clarence. And as he had always been her supportive helpmate, she was his throughout his lengthy illness. We all still miss Clarence. Betty has been a champion for all people, including those with special needs and women striving for their equal place in government. She has a big heart and a lot of common sense, qualities which have helped mold the policies and therefore the development of our city. Betty, you have faced tremendous challenges and responsibility in your life, and you have borne them gracefully. I have tremendous admiration for you. Duane, long before televised council meetings, my only exposure to you was the photographs that I saw in our local newspapers. And every picture of Duane showed this very proper-looking man who often wasn't smiling. And I remember thinking, he looks stern, really straight-laced. Now, once I met Duane, first as a citizen and then as a colleague, I quickly realized what a nice, gentle, thoughtful man he is. And he is a lot of fun. He is incredibly well-read, a deep thinker on issues relating to government, community development, and societal issues. I suppose that fits with a man who dedicated his life to educating young minds. He has also helped to educate our residents and other government leaders. I remember attending the League of Minnesota Cities annual convention my first year on the council. Duane was a speaker at the convention, and I remember being impressed by his knowledge and his speaking ability. But more than that, I was proud, Duane, that you were my mayor, that you represented our city, and that all of the other elected leaders in our state could see what a bright, articulate man the citizens of Lakeville had selected as their mayor. I was proud to be associated with you, and still am. I have watched you officiate council meetings where volatile issues were being discussed, and you were able to keep the proceedings civil and on track. I marvel at your general ability to so smoothly conduct meetings. You make it look so easy, Duane, but as anyone who has done it knows, it's not. You have always treated me with kindness and respect, and I, in return, have the highest respect for you. Since I joined the City Council, there have been a number of council members who have come and gone. For me, Betty and Duane were the anchors on the council, like long-term neighbors who bring a sense of history to your block and provide stability in the neighborhood. Their departure is a big loss for me personally, because it's like losing both of my neighbors who've lived in the neighborhood the longest at the same time, my security blanket, if you will. But I also realize that both of you have earned the right to recapture the free time in your life. Your families deserve to have that time with you, because serving in public office takes so much of your time away from your loved ones. If you look at a map of the city, you just see lines and street names and indications of where parks and schools and government buildings are located. But if we could lay a map of our city flat on the ground and rise above it and watch it become three-dimensional with trees and homes, blue lakes, parks with playground equipment, beautiful corporate headquarter buildings, people, it would be like looking at a three-dimensional tapestry of Lakeville. And woven throughout that tapestry are the years of hard work, thoughtful decisions, insight, and proactive policies gifted to Lakeville by its elected officials, employees, and committee and commission members. But no one has played a larger role in Lakeville's development and history than Duane and Betty. Because of their many years of service, the Lakeville residents, business owners, and various friends wanted to do something special for them. So they commissioned artist Frank Wetzel to design a commemorative watercolor painting in order of Duane and Betty's many contributions to our city. Mr. Wetzel became a full-time professional painter of landscapes and portraits 10 years ago after a successful career in advertising. He is also an instructor of drawing and painting at the Minnesota River School of Fine Arts in Burnsville. He is the winner of many awards, including the Blue Ribbon for Painting at the 1996 Minnesota State Fair. His work is in national and international collections. And his original painting will be on permanent display in the City Council chambers. So at this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Wetzel to please help me move the portrait forward, and we can present it to Duane and Betty.
Well, I would just like to say a couple of things, but maybe Bob has the floor
I
yet.
just want to just close, Duane, and just,
I'm the parliamentarian, but I'll yield.
We'd like to get a, thank you very much. We'd like to get a photo of each of you next to that, the original watercolor here in just a moment. I just want to say this personally, and on behalf of the staff, past, current staff members, just ask me to just indicate to you that you've been very much appreciated these past 2 decades. And this may surprise you, but you're really not going to be missed. Because we expect to maintain close contact with each of you. And most importantly, you're going to be in our hearts forever. And we wish you and your families good health and prosperity in the years to come. And thanks for the memories. It's been great.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Had some taken earlier.
We will, I think, allow 3 minutes in response. Betty, if you want to say a couple words, I think it would be appropriate, and then I'll finish up.
Oh, you're going to do the cleanup work?
Right.
Okay. Well, my husband and I came to Lakeville in 1978, and I had lived in many different communities because of my husband's employment. And I will say that this was the most friendly community I'd ever been in. And of course, I got involved right away, but I'm never happy, as most people know. I always have to tinker with something. So we both enjoyed our time here. And the years that I've worked with the council has been fantastic. I guess I would just like to say thank you to the staff the advisory committee people, to the citizens of Lakeville, and to the council members, because you've all been very good friends to me, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
I would just like to say thank you to everybody that's here this evening. I know there were many that called and said they couldn't make it because of the weather. My friends, the snowbirds in Arizona and Florida, wanted to be here, and I said, well, maybe when they get back in spring, well, we'll have a little get-together, and we can share stories that we probably can't share right here, right now. But again, I want to thank my wife, Mary, my family through all those years, 26 years or whatever, and the fact that they did allow me to participate in city government. And there were many, many times that it was difficult. I know it was, and I apologize for the fact that perhaps I wasn't around as much as I could have been or should have been. But I think and I hope and I pray that my children learn something from the volunteer work that is done by everybody in their communities. I really should thank a lot of people, but I'm afraid I'm going to miss somebody. But one person that has always been very, very important in my life, Mr. Jim Eamon, I want to thank him for being part of this, and I want to thank all of the many individuals and organizations who contributed and were part of our recognition here. That is important, I think, to Betty and certainly to me for what you have done. Being in a community that has been growing is not that easy. We know that over the years, I think both Betty and I, having had a full-time job and working, it was difficult. And you know the story of I had to get up at 4:30 in the morning just to get to where I taught in Bloomington, and then be back in the afternoon and to check the voicemail and the mail, and for meetings. And there were many, many times, particularly this time of the year when it's dark, you get up in the morning, you get home in the evening, it's dark, and you got meetings to go to. It was very, very difficult, and I think Betty will attest to that as well. But certainly, this community has been very, very, I think, important to Betty and I. I think, speaking for Betty as well, we are the luckiest people certainly in our community to have had the privilege to serve you over these many, many years. And just in closing, I have to say a little, I suppose, funny little thing here. I want to thank Bob Erickson and the staff, and certainly Lynette and my fellow council members over all the years for what they have done and how they have helped me, and the information and advice they've given to me. But considering this evening, I'm sure those of you in the audience are saying, thank heavens we didn't have 5 council members retired. So thank you, though, for being here. God bless all of you. And I don't know if you have anything else that you have planned that we're unaware of.
I do know that Mayor-elect Johnson, is Bob with us, would like to say a few words.
It's one of the last times I can stand on this podium here, on this side. I look forward to saying this. As just a citizen this evening, and forgive my gravelly voice, but as a citizen of Lakeville who's had the privilege to work with these two folks over the past several years, I really have come to appreciate the dedication that they really had and the love that they had for Lakeville. The time that's been spoken of by many of the speakers and stuff, away from family, away from friends, reading that terribly interesting stuff that Mr. Erickson gives us in the hundreds of pages. I'm not sure the citizens always realize the amount of work that the council it does to go into that. And I think as we've seen the growth of this city, the way it's developed over, it showed the dedication that you and other council members, but obviously with your leadership through the years, Lakeville has continued to maintain the quality that has brought all of us here to that. And as incoming mayor and as a past council member, I really enjoyed my time immensely with you as that council. The leadership that you proved to me, I hope will carry over. And as Mr. Erickson stated, you made the meetings look easy. I'm going to do the best I can to make sure that doesn't happen as I take over. That's a joke, Duane. It's a joke.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, it's not a Zaunism, but we'll have to find another one for that. But just to express my deep thanks, and on behalf of all the citizens who enjoy this city and the efforts that you've made to make this a quality place it is, we wish you both the very best as you go into retirement.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Mayor-elect Bob Johnson. Thanks. It might be appropriate at this time, before we move on, to just take a 5-minute recess. If